Hello everyone, this is Kestrel. So, I assume most of you have either watched in snippet since it was such a disgraceful clusterfuck of old men interrupting each other, or have heard enough reports and details of it to come to that very conclusion. The 2020 United States presidential debate between President Trump and Joe Biden. President Trump barely let Joe Biden get through the beginning of his answers to Chris Wallace's questions, and Joe Biden mostly refused to answer any questions he could have gotten in answers about some very important issues and points. And when he did provide an answer, the answer was either a cop out or an obvious lie. In fact, most of them were obvious lies. And as the verbal slugfest went on, Chris Wallace proved his complete incompetence as a moderator, as well as his clear biases to the radical leftist side, covered for Joe Biden at every opportunity. And I was wondering after that debate, why is it we can't get a moderator who simply asks critical questions and then stops to let the candidates answer? And when they do interrupt each other or refuse to answer, insists that they either give the other the time to answer or, you know, in the election for the leader of a country or for any high position really, the voting population really does need, in fact, to know the opinions, motivations, worldviews, and policy plans of each candidate. Otherwise, the voters will not actually be able to make an informed decision when they vote at all. And that's why it's important that they be asked to provide an answer, not be able to just dodge questions whenever they want. So Joe Biden needed to be made to answer, not in any violent confrontation way, of course, but he needs to give answers. And the first moderator, Chris Wallace, and as well as the mainstream media, completely keep covering for him so that he doesn't have to. Well, he's going to have to. Though the moderator for the vice presidential debate between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, her name was Susan Page, she handled the role of moderator much better than Chris Wallace did. And to someone who watched the debate wanting reasonable answers to questions on policy and planning, there was no contest between those two candidates who won. Mike Pence won the VP candidate by a landslide. Won the VP debate, not candidate. He is the candidate. So Susan Page started off by making it clear that the American people want to see civil debates between politicians, which is 100% true. Now, she asked Kamala Harris if she and Joe Biden would consider imposing new lockdown and masking restrictions against the COVID-19 pandemic, and Harris dodged that question. She refused to answer, and when Kamala Harris said that on day one of a Joe Biden presidency, Biden will repeal the Trump tax cuts, and Mike Pence, in his response, wrote that what that means is that on day one of a Biden presidency, Joe Biden will raise the taxes of Americans. You get rid of tax cuts, that means getting rid of reductions in taxes, so you automatically increase the taxes. And Joe Biden himself has actually said this. He has said before, you elect me, your taxes will increase, not decrease. That is on record. Joe Biden will repeal the Trump tax cuts. He will raise the taxes of Americans if he is elected to the presidency. A repeal of Trump's tax cuts means that your taxes increase. And considering all the finances and livelihoods of so many millions of Americans who have had their jobs, schools, and communities restricted, strained, many of them outright shut down by the government in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which was always an extreme exaggeration of what measures would have been logical to take, that the pandemic, remember, the COVID-19 pandemic was released by an aggressive anti-freedom communist country, China, in order to distract the world from their imperialistic expansion, takeover of formerly free Hong Kong, eyes on Taiwan next, and an enemy who would love nothing more than to ally with socialist and communist Democrats in the United States, which is pretty much all Democrats at this point, since the radicals have completely taken over the party. China would like nothing more to unite with them and socialists and communists in the West as a whole in order to destroy America and the free and independent way of life. How many of us Americans can afford to have to pay more taxes? We need the Trump tax cuts. We need not only the Trump pandemic policy, which I admit the the Trump administration has been iffy to not good on its rhetoric, but on its actual policy, as in cutting off travel from China and in letting the individual state and city governments, the governments and mayors, form their own policy, what they deem necessary. In other words, the federal government backing off, exercising total power, has actually been very good. The problem has been a lot of Democratic state mayors and governors, such as Gavin Newsom of California. California has fallen into complete, almost as far as I see it, irreversible chaos. And, you know, I was talking to some coworkers about some of these topics this week, and I was talking to one of them before I began working in a machine shop in early April. I spent almost my entire life reading up and training to be an ecologist, which I still want to do again someday. And I've been looking at California for a long time. I have no idea how to save it now. Also, Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio of New York that have kept their state and city completely shut down far, long beyond necessity, and have shipped COVID-19 positive patients back into nursing homes where they should have been. The nursing homes should have been the focal points shielded from COVID-19, since it is the very elderly who are most susceptible. And Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, who shut her state down completely. I was in Michigan last November to visit Hillsdale College, and it was beautiful. And the shutdowns were aggressive to such an extent that Gretchen Whitmer would send police out to make sure people weren't even gardening in their own lawns, to an insane extent. Whereas the red states, the Republican states, have been reopening and have been rebuilding their economies. The economy never should have stayed shut down for as long as it was. There should never have been a complete shutdown. There should have been just some basic, if there must be, masking and distancing measures, and keep letting people work and go to school and go back to their lives, such as America should have done what Sweden did, is my opinion. So I've been working in a machine parts shop since early April. It's an essential job that makes machine parts for other essential technologies, such as medical, military, and other machine and scientific professions. And I've been going to work every single workday since acquiring that job, despite well, for me, it's a relatively small risk that COVID-19 presents, because I am relatively quite young and resilient. I have reluctantly been wearing a mask at work and to every place that requires it, despite hating doing so. But what I hate most of all is how politics has dominated the pandemic response policies rather than science. And the science says that to the vast majority of people, the risk of becoming seriously ill or dying is actually extremely small. Mostly the risk is in the people with a lot of stacked health issues already, or the very elderly. And we're talking the very elderly, like 60, 70 plus. I mean, even upper middle age is still relatively uh, rare to die from this thing. But the mainstream media wants everyone to be so terrified of COVID 19 that we never emerge from our homes, stay alone and socially isolated, which humans do not do well with. We are a social interaction species, while um, but they want us distracted while the communist colluding Democrats take power in ever bloating oppressive government, and the America that used to be the lantern of hope of freedom to the world is snuffed out without opposition. And if Joe Biden wins the 2020 US presidential election, that is what will happen. And we must not let that come to pass. We need to re-elect Donald Trump. As sloppy as his rhetoric is, his his plans, his policies are far better than anything the Democrats have. I mean, really all the Democrats have is two modus operandi. One is pour every false accusation onto their opponents or anyone who questions them that they can think of, and they've been making long lists of false accusations and identity politics, which frustrates reasonable people to no end. And the second modus operandi is plagiarizing the Republican plans, saying they will go with those, or that those are their own plans. And then when the Democrats actually get into power, they bloat the government and enforce socialism and communism, which will completely destroy the country and everyone will starve to death. It's happened before. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have both been asked whether they would pack the Supreme Court with Democratic agenda justices, and both refused to answer the question, which is an obvious confession that, of course, they will. They fully plan to. We know that Kamala Harris has been very willing to embrace the option of packing the court. She said so herself in 2019, just as Joe Biden has said before himself that he, in power, will increase taxes. They they try to hide it now, but they have not hidden it before, and there's been no explanation, no reason why they would ever change their opinions. Of course, they haven't. They haven't changed their plans or agenda. Joe Biden has said that he will not talk about his plans or agendas until after the election. In other words, again, it's them trying to hide it now. He won't reveal his policies until after he is in office, which is completely unacceptable to a voting population that is supposed to be able to cast informed votes based on who they believe is the better, more reasonable candidate. But no one can know that unless they know what their candidates' plans and policies are. So the candidates, I'll say this again, have to answer those questions. But Biden and Harris completely refuse to, which in the eyes of rational voters should immediately disqualify them from being elected to power. May I'll be honest, since I believe in telling anyone who I converse with or speak to the truth about my opinions and worldview, that the only way to make an argument is to make my honest case. And if my case happens to be wrong or misinformed, have it rebutted so I can come back better prepared and better informed next time. So that is why I believe in and practice honesty. And regarding this United States 2020 election, my view is this: America must elect Donald Trump for a second term.